The first shot shattered the silence of the prairie. Birds scattered from the lone cottonwood tree, their wings a flurry of movement against the morning sun. The second shot followed, and this time the scream came. Daniel's body hit the dirt, his weight kicking up dust. His eyes, wide with shock, sought hers as his hands trembled over the fresh, blooming wound in his chest. "No, no, no," she gasped, dropping to her knees, reaching for him. Blood soaked through the pale fabric of his shirt, staining the place where her head had rested just hours before. His lips moved, but no sound came. The world shrank to just them. Then the outlaw's boots stepped into her vision. A heavy shadow cast over them both. Silas Graves. He smiled as he rolled a cigarette between his fingers, his pistol still smoking in his hand. "Sorry, missus. Your man wasn't smart enough to listen." Her breath came in ragged, panicked gasps. The 5 men behind him loomed like hungry wolves, the same ones that had circled their homestead the night before, demanding Daniel's land, demanding their home. Daniel had told her to stay inside, told her not to come out no matter what. She hadn't listened. Now he was dying in the dirt, and she was left staring into the cold, dead eyes of a killer. Silas tilted his head as if considering her, then crouched down. The leather of his coat creaked as he reached out and grabbed her chin, forcing her to look at him. His breath stank of whiskey and cheap tobacco. "You want to live?" he asked. She didn't answer. Silas smiled wider. "Didn't think so." He shoved her backward, hard, and she hit the ground as he stood. "Burn it," he said to his men. Terror surged through her as she scrambled to her feet. "No." The first torch was thrown onto the porch. Flames licked up the wooden walls, spreading like hunger itself. The house where she and Daniel had dreamed of raising a family, of growing old together, was devoured in an instant. She screamed. Silas just laughed, pulling himself onto his horse. "Ain't nothing personal, missus. Just business." Then they were riding away, kicking up dust as they vanished over the horizon. She barely noticed when her knees hit the ground again. Daniel's body was still warm when she curled herself over him. She stayed there long after the flames turned their home to ashes. The shovel felt heavier with every stroke. She had dug the grave alone, sweating under the ruthless afternoon sun. Her hands, raw from the wooden handle, bled onto the parched ground. No priest, no words, just silence as she lowered Daniel into the hole. Her breath hitched as she reached out, brushing her fingers over his cheek one last time. Then she buried him. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, only a wooden cross stood over the fresh mound of dirt. The name carved into it was uneven, jagged. Daniel Hawthorne. She sat beside the grave, her arms wrapped around her knees, staring at the fading firelight in the distance. The outlaws had stopped in town, no doubt drinking, laughing. She clenched her jaw. Her hands shook, but not from fear. Not anymore. She rose. Inside what was left of their barn, half collapsed from the fire, she found Daniel's rifle, his Lancaster repeater, miraculously untouched by the flames. Her fingers curled around the wooden stock, and for the first time since the morning, she breathed. She took what else she needed, bullets, a knife, the revolver Daniel had kept by their bedside. Then she mounted the only horse the outlaws had left behind and rode toward town. The Red Lantern saloon pulsed with light and drunken laughter. She stood outside for a long moment, staring at the place that had taken the men who had taken everything from her. The wooden steps creaked beneath her boots as she climbed them. Inside, the air was thick with tobacco smoke and whiskey fumes. She saw him immediately. Jed Barnes, one of Silas's men. He leaned against the bar, a half-empty bottle in his hand, laughing with a woman draped over his lap. His words slurred as he boasted about the day's work. "Never seen a man drop so fast," he said, shaking his head. "Poor bastard didn't even get to raise his gun." The woman laughed, unconcerned. "And the wife?" Jed grinned. "Pretty little thing, but she ain't gonna last long." His words made the saloon spin around her. She stepped forward. No hesitation. The Lancaster's barrel pressed against the back of his skull. The saloon went silent. Jed stiffened. "What the?" "This is for Daniel." She pulled the trigger. The gunshot roared through the saloon like a thunderclap. Blood sprayed across the bar as Jed collapsed forward, the bottle shattering on the floor. Screams erupted. Chairs scraped against the wood as people scrambled back. She turned, rifle still raised, eyes meeting every single person in the room. A man reached for his gun. She fired again, this time at a whiskey bottle near his hand. Glass exploded. "No one moves," she said. A cold, perfect silence followed. The bartender, hands raised, took a cautious step back. "Ma'am, I'm not here for you." Her gaze swept the room. "You tell Silas Graves." She let the words hang, let them soak into every terrified man and woman in that saloon. "I'm coming for him." She turned, stepping over Jed's body, and walked out into the night. She could feel the whispers already forming behind her. The legend beginning. Widowmaker widow. And the hunt had just begun. The night air carried whispers. Some spoken in fear, others in awe. A woman had walked into the Red Lantern Saloon, killed a man in cold blood, and left like she had nothing left to lose. The name had spread before dawn, rolling across the town like a ghost story. Widowmaker widow. She rode through the blackened fields, the wind slicing cold against her face. Behind her, smoke still curled from the remains of her home. But there was no turning back. Not now. Not ever. By the time she reached Black Hollow, the town was stirring to life. Oil lamps flickered in windows. Wagons rattled along the dirt roads. Merchants setting up their stalls. Women sweeping dust from porches. It looked the same as it always had. But something was different now. They stared at her. Some with wide eyes, others with cautious glances. A few tipped their hats, stepping aside. She wasn't just another widow now. She was something else entirely. Sheriff August Lane met her outside his office. A tall man, gray creeping into his beard, revolver hanging loose on his hip. He took her in, gaze lingering on the rifle strapped across her back, the dirt and blood staining her clothes. "You should leave," he said. She didn't move. Lane sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "You got any idea what you started?" "I do." His eyes darkened. Jed Barnes was a bastard, but killing him in front of half the town? That ain't something a woman like you walks away from. She looked past him toward the wanted posters fluttering on the wooden board outside his office. Silas Graves. His men. Their faces leered back at her, the inked bounties a fraction of what their lives were worth. "I'm not walking away." Lane exhaled through his nose, glancing up and down the street. People were still watching. He stepped closer, voice low. "You're making enemies you can't outrun." She met his gaze. "I don't plan on running." For a moment, there was nothing but the wind kicking up dust between them. Then Lane gave a slow nod. "Then you best be fast." She left him there, boots heavy against the wooden planks as she stepped into the general store. The owner, Josiah Keller, stiffened at the sight of her. A round man, balding, with the nervous hands of someone who had lived too long under the rule of outlaws. She placed a handful of coins on the counter. "Ammunition. Supplies. Whatever this gets me." Keller hesitated, eyes darting to the street outside, as if Silas himself might be watching. She lifted her chin. "I won't ask twice." He swallowed hard, then moved quickly, pulling a sack from behind the counter. "Boxes of bullets. Dried meat. A canteen. Careful, miss," he muttered as he handed it over. "A woman alone don't last long in these parts." She took the sack, adjusting the weight on her shoulder. "I'm not alone." And she was gone. The trading post sat at the edge of town, tucked between the bluffs and the river. It was where outlaws passed through, where stolen goods changed hands, where men like Silas's crew thought they were untouchable. That's where she found them. For men. 5, if Silas was there. She waited, crouched in the shadows of an abandoned shack, watching the flickering lanterns through the windows. They were inside, drinking, laughing. She slipped closer. The night smelled of damp earth and tobacco smoke. Every step was deliberate, careful. She needed an advantage. The horses were tied out back, their reins looped loosely over the hitching post. She pulled her knife from her belt and severed them with a single, swift motion. The animals wouldn't go far, but when the time came, they'd be gone. Next, she crept toward the side entrance. A barrel of lamp oil sat near the door, half empty. She tipped it just enough, letting the slick liquid seep into the dirt. A crash came from inside. Laughter. A bottle breaking. She moved fast, stepping for the back door, rifle raised. Lenny Carr, one of Silas's crew, turned just as she entered. His whiskey bottle lifted to his lips, head tipped back. He barely had time to lower it before she pulled the trigger. The shot tore through him, slamming him back into the wall. The room exploded into chaos. Buckley Hayes reached for his gun. She shot first. The bullet caught him in the chest, sent him staggering into the table. The other two went for the door. She lit a match and tossed it onto the oil-soaked ground. Fire roared to life, blocking their escape. One of them, Charlie Dodd, turned, teeth bared in a snarl. "You crazy bitch." She shot him, cutting off the words before he could finish. The last one, Clive Mercer, made it to the window, shattering the glass as he dove through. She stepped over Charlie's body, firing into the flames. A second later, she heard the horses galloping away. Clive was running. She led him. The fire spread quickly, consuming the old wood, crackling as it climbed the walls. She turned back, breathing hard. The bodies lay where they had fallen, blood mixing with the dirt. She reloaded. 3 down, 2 to go. Stepping back into the night, she mounted her horse and rode after Clive, the flames behind her painting the sky in shades of orange and black. By the time she reached the outskirts of Silver Creek, the trail was fresh. Clive had left a mess in his wake. Branches broken, hoof prints deep *** in the softened earth from his frantic escape. He wasn't thinking. He was running scared. She followed him into the canyon, her rifle resting easy against her saddle. The moon hung high, casting long shadows. The sound of rushing water echoed off the stone walls. Ahead, a flickering light. A small campfire. She dismounted, moving low, keeping to the rocks. Clive sat hunched, gun in his lap, eyes darting into the darkness. He was shaking, muttering to himself, "Dead. They're all dead. Silas is going to kill me." She stepped forward. The snap of a twig made his head jerk up. His gun came up fast, but she was faster. She kicked the weapon from his hand, knocking him onto his back. He scrambled, but she leveled her rifle at him. "Where is he?" Clive's breath came in shallow gasps. He coughed. His lip was bleeding. Please don't." She pressed the barrel against his forehead. "Where?" He swallowed hard. His body trembled. "Old Fort," he gasped. "Up in the mountains. Near Devil's Pass. That's where Silas is." She stared down at him, the weight of his words settling deep in her chest. Then she pulled the trigger. The shot echoed through the canyon. Clive's body slumped to the ground. She exhaled, stepping back. Silas Graves was waiting for her, and she was coming for him. The wind howled through the canyon, threading through the jagged rocks like a whispered warning. She stood over Clive Mercer's still body, watching the blood seep into the dirt, disappearing into the cracks of the earth as though the land itself were swallowing him whole. His last words clung to the night air, unshaken by the gunshot that had silenced him. Devil's Pass, the old fort, Silas Graves, ***. She turned her gaze toward the mountains looming in the distance. The shadows stretched long beneath the moon, jagged peaks cutting into the sky like the teeth of some slumbering beast. Somewhere up there, Silas was waiting, and she was coming for him. She retrieved her spent casing from the dirt, slipping it into her pocket. The weight of her rifle felt heavier now, not from exhaustion, but from the certainty of what lay ahead. She had burned through the men who had stolen her life, but Silas was different. Killing him wasn't just revenge. It was an ending, a reckoning. She mounted her horse and rode toward the mountains, the wind at her back and the scent of blood still thick in her nostrils. By the time dawn broke, she had reached the base of the foothills. The land grew rough here, steep, uneven, riddled with switchbacks and narrow passes where a single misstep could send a horse tumbling to its death. The trail would be slower now, the climb harder. She wasn't alone. The moment she stepped down from her saddle, she felt eyes on her. A presence just beyond the trees, watching. She kept her hands loose by her sides, close to her revolver, but not on it. Not yet. A branch snapped. The the whisper of movement through the underbrush. Then a man stepped forward, his silhouette outlined by the rising sun. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark braids framing a weathered face. His eyes, sharp as a hawk's, studied her as though he could already see the blood she carried. "You're the one they're whispering about," he said. She met his gaze without flinching. "And you are?" "Tawodi," he said simply. "Cheyenne." She let the silence stretch between them. He nodded toward the rifle slung over her back. "You hunt a man." "I do." His expression didn't change. "Silas Graves." She tensed, fingers flexing near her holster. "You know him?" Tawodi's lips curled slightly, though it wasn't amusement. "I've tracked him before. He and his men took from my people. Stole, burned, killed. He is a coward who thinks himself a wolf." His eyes narrowed. "You go to his den alone?" "I don't need help," she said. Tawodi tilted his head. "Perhaps not. But the mountains do not care about your revenge. They swallow those who do not respect them." She exhaled, glancing toward the distant peaks. Every instinct screamed that she should keep moving, that she had no time for conversation. But she wasn't a fool. She knew the dangers of the wilderness, and if Tawodi had been tracking Silas before, then he knew more than she did. She looked back at him. "You know the way." He nodded. "Then show me." The climb was brutal. The path twisted upward in sharp inclines, forcing them to lead the horses on foot. The morning sun burned away the chill, but sweat slicked their backs as they moved. Tawodi led with sure steps, navigating through dense pines and sheer rock faces with the ease of someone who belonged to the land. She followed, listening, watching. "You fight like someone who's lost everything," he said after a while. She didn't answer. He didn't press, only nodded as though he had already known the truth. Revenge is a cold fire. It burns without warmth. She adjusted the strap of her rifle, gaze fixed ahead. "That's fine. I don't need warmth." Tawodi studied her for a long moment, then simply said, "We'll see." The river crossing tested them both. The water ran swift and deep, churned by the spring melt. Tawodi moved first, guiding his horse through the shallows, but halfway across, the current caught the animal's legs. He barely had time to shout before he was pulled under. She moved without thinking, diving into the freezing water. The cold was a fist around her lungs, stealing the breath from her chest as she fought against the rapids. Tawodi surfaced, gasping, his hands scrabbling against slick rocks. She reached him just as the current tried to drag him deeper. Her fingers locked onto his arm, and she hauled him toward the far bank with every ounce of strength left in her body. They collapsed onto the rocks, coughing water, chests heaving. Tawodi turned to look at her, surprise flickering behind his eyes. Then slowly he nodded. "You could have let me drown," he said. She wiped the water from her face, breath still ragged. "Wouldn't have been right." For the first time he smiled. "Just a little. Maybe you are not as cold as you think." By nightfall, they had reached the edge of Devil's Pass. The old fort loomed ahead, a crumbling ruin perched atop the cliffs. It had once been a military outpost, abandoned after the war, left to the crows and the rot. Now belonged to Silas. A fire flickered within its broken walls. Shadows moved along the ramparts. Tawodi crouched beside her, scanning the fort. 6 men. She frowned. "Should be 5. Tawodi pointed toward the eastern watchtower, where a figure leaned against the wooden rail, smoking. Reinforcements, maybe. She clenched her jaw. Time was against them. If more men were coming, the odds would shift. Tawodi turned to her. "We move at dawn." She nodded, but sleep didn't come. She sat with her back against a boulder, staring at the distant fire, feeling its warmth even from here. She thought of Daniel, of their home, of the life that had been stolen from her. Silas was up there, and, come sunrise, she would finish this. The sky bled with the first streaks of dawn. A cold wind rolled down from the mountains, rustling through the pines, whispering through the ruins of the fort. The fire inside its broken walls had burned low, its embers pulsing like dying stars. She crouched beside Tawodi, her rifle nestled against her shoulder. The night's silence had stretched thin, taut with waiting. Now, the time for patience was over. She adjusted the grip on her rifle, steadying her breath. "We move now." Tawoti didn't argue. He only nodded once, his own knife gleaming in the dim light. The plan was simple. No theatrics, no grand gestures, just cold, brutal efficiency. They moved like shadows. The damp earth muffled their steps as they slipped past the ruined outbuildings, past the skeletal remains of the stockade fence. The walls were crumbling, the wood long since turned brittle by wind and time. She pressed against the stone, heart steady. 2 men by the fire, 1 on the watchtower, 2 more at the gate. Silas would be inside. She lifted her rifle. A breath, a squeeze of the trigger. The sentry on the tower jerked back, a red mist blooming from his skull. The moment his body hit the ground, she and Tawoti moved. A heartbeat of silence. Then, shouting. The 2 men by the fire were scrambling for their guns, eyes wide. She fired again. The first went down, clutching his throat. The second staggered, reaching for his rifle, too slow. Tawoti's knife flashed in the dim light. The man slumped forward, his lifeblood spilling into the dirt. The 2 guards at the gate turned, one fumbling for his revolver, the other already raising his shotgun. She dove behind a pile of broken crates as buckshot tore through the air, wood splintering around her. Tawoti rolled to the side, a second blade flying from his hand, burying deep into the nearest man's chest. The last one turned to run. She didn't let him. The Lancaster's barrel followed him, her fingers steady on the trigger. A single shot rang out. The man collapsed. And then silence. The air smelled of blood and gunpowder. 5 down. Only 1 left. Silas. She moved through the ruined corridors, past rooms long since emptied of purpose. Her heart drummed steady in her chest, her pulse a slow, deliberate rhythm. The storm in her mind had quieted. No hesitation, no fear. Footsteps echoed in the hall ahead. She lifted her rifle. A door swung open. Silas Graves stepped into the dim light, his revolver already raised. She threw herself sideways as the first shot shattered the stone behind her, dust and debris cutting into her cheek. Rolling to one knee, she fired. The bullet grazed his shoulder, spinning him back through the door. She followed. The room was empty except for a table, a chair, and a man she had hunted across miles of dust and death. Silas gritted his teeth, pressing a hand to his bleeding shoulder. He looked at her, then laughed. "Well, ain't this something?" he muttered. "The little widow made it all this way." She kept her rifle leveled, stepping forward. "You killed my husband." Silas smirked. He got in the way. She pulled the trigger. The rifle clicked empty. Silas moved fast. Too fast. He lunged, his revolver swinging up. She threw the rifle at his face, buying half a second as he flinched. Then she was on him. The world collapsed into violence. She drove her fist into his gut, feeling the air rush from his lungs. He staggered, but his elbow cracked against her ribs, sending pain lancing through her side. She didn't fall, didn't stop. She reached for her knife, but Silas caught her wrist, twisting hard. She snarled, using the momentum to drive her knee into his ribs. He grunted, stumbling back, then swung his pistol-like club. The metal crashed into her temple, and the world exploded into white-hot pain. She hit the ground hard, the taste of copper in her mouth. Silas loomed over her, panting, blood dripping from his split lip. "That all you got, widow?" he taunted, cocking the hammer of his revolver. She looked up at him, her vision swimming. Then she smiled. Silas frowned. That was when he realized. Her knife was still in her hand. Before he could fire, she drove the blade deep into his thigh. Silas screamed, the gunshot going wide as he stumbled back. She kicked out, knocking him off his feet. The revolver clattered to the floor. She was on him in an instant, straddling his chest, her knife pressing against his throat. His breath came in ragged gasps, his fingers twitching toward the revolver just inches away. She pressed harder, the blade biting into his skin. "Go on," he rasped, eyes burning. "Finish it." She could feel his heartbeat against the blade, could feel the weight of every moment that had led her here. Her husband's laughter, their home, the life they had dreamed of, gone, because of him. Her fingers tightened on the hilt. and she slashed the knife across his throat. Silas choked. His body jerked beneath her, blood spilling from the deep, gaping wound. His hands clawed at his neck, desperate, fading. Then, stillness. She sat there for a long moment, breathing hard. The storm inside her went quiet. She rose slowly, wiping the blade against his coat. Then she stepped outside. The night was still. The fires had burned low. Tawodi stood near the entrance, waiting. She met his gaze. "It's done," she said. He studied her for a long moment, then gave a single nod. "Then let's leave this place." She didn't look back. By the time they reached the canyon, the first light of dawn had begun to touch the peaks. The sky, for the first time in weeks, was clear. She took a slow breath, tasting the air. It felt different, lighter. Tawodi mounted his horse. "Where will you go?" She stared down at her hands. The blood had dried. The scars would remain. Finally, she looked ahead. "Wherever the road takes me." Tawodi nodded once. Then, with a small, knowing smile, he turned and rode into the morning. She stood there for a moment longer, listening to the wind, to the sound of the world moving on. Then she mounted her horse, and without another word, Widowmaker Widow rode into legend.